My phone buzzed once then, twice cutting through the hum of my old ceiling fan. I ignored it, reaching instead for the mug of black coffee I'd been nursing since dawn. The second buzz turned into a long vibration persistent enough to rattle the wood table. I sighed, flipped the phone over and froze. On my screen was a photo of my sister Lily glowing in a white satin gown. The caption read "Times final, fitting for the big day." Times her fiancé Ryan stood beside her, handsome and polished. Beneath the post, Times, "Can't wait for the wedding. So happy for you both." Times. Dozens of comments, hundreds of likes. My stomach twisted. Wedding. What wedding? I scrolled faster. More photos, our mother holding invitation samples. My cousin twirling in a bridesmaid dress, our father tasting cake samples. Every relative in sight, everyone but me. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Mom. Times, "Sweetheart, let's not make this about you. Lily's special day needs to be perfect." Asterisk, I stared at it until the words blurred. Perfect. Apparently perfect didn't include me. I pushed back from the table and stood by the window. Outside, Charleston's morning sun spilled across the narrow street, lighting up the ivy along my porch railing. The neighborhood was waking up, delivery trucks, barking dogs, someone mowing a lawn nearby. Life moved on, as if nothing had cracked open. My reflection stared back from the glass hair, pulled up messily tired eyes, a woman who built things for a living but had no idea how to hold her own family together. My phone buzzed again, a call this time. "Mom." I picked up. "Hi," I said, voice, even though my pulse pounded. "Oh, Maddie, I was just about to call you," she said too brightly. "How's work, sweetheart? Still restoring that old Victorian?" "Work's fine," I said flatly. "I just saw Lily's wedding post." Silence stretched for several beats, then a quick inhale. "Oh, I was going to tell you about that." Was my invitation lost in the mail? She sighed, the long, patient kind of sigh that used to make me feel 10 years old. "Let's not turn this into drama, honey. You know how sensitive Lily is." "What does that have to do with me not being invited?" "You're always so busy. And she felt you wouldn't make time anyway. Ryan thinks family should be about joy, not stress." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. "And I'm stress." Her tone sharpened. "You know what I mean. You've been independent for so long. Lily just wants peace on her day." "Peace?" I almost laughed. "You mean silence?" "Madeline," she said softly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The house was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I walked through my workshop, past the half-sanded window frames and the scent of varnish, into the living room. Every beam, every nail, every inch of this craftsman home had passed through my hands. I'd spent years fixing what time had broken. But there were some things no tool could mend. I sat down on the old leather armchair and stared at the phone lying face up on the coffee table. Notifications kept popping up, posts, photos, comments. Lily surrounded by flowers. Mom adjusting her veil. Dad's proud smile. A family portrait without me. It shouldn't have surprised me. Lily had always been the adored one, the softer, prettier one. The one Mom called "Times my delicate girl." Asterisk, I'd been the responsible one. The fixer. The one who paid Lily's cafe loan when it failed. The one who picked up the pieces when her marriage collapsed. The one who covered for her when she didn't show up to Grandma's funeral because she was too sad. I remembered a night years ago, Lily sobbing on my couch after her husband left. I'd made tea, held her hand, told her she'd rebuild. She'd whispered, "You're the strong one, Maddie." At the time it had felt like love. Now it sounded like a sentence. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and sat back. The red wine caught a stripe of sunlight through the window, turning it into something almost beautiful. My phone buzzed again, texts from coworkers, friends, even my neighbor. Asterisk. Did you see your sister's engagement photos? They're stunning. Asterisk, asterisk. You must be so proud. Times. Each word landed like a bruise. Pride. That used to be the thing I felt when I restored an old staircase when I brought something forgotten back to life. But this felt like erasure. I put the glass down and picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over Lily's profile. Then, with deliberate calm, I tapped times unfollow, mom, dad, cousins, one by one. Each click sounded like a nail sealing a door. For the first time in years, my feed went quiet. No smiling faces, no forced family unity, just stillness. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The silence felt heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was clean. A faint knock pulled me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, holding a paper bag. "Morning, dear. Thought you could use some of my banana bread. I saw all that wedding fuss online must be hard." Her kindness hit harder than the wedding posts. "Thank you," I said, softly taking the bag. She patted my hand. "Families can be foolish. Remember, peace isn't always staying quiet. Sometimes it's walking away." When she left, I stood in the doorway, the scent of banana and cinnamon rising from the bag. For a moment, I almost cried. Not because of the betrayal, but because someone finally understood. By evening, the house glowed golden with the last of the daylight. I lit a single lamp, poured another glass of wine, and sank into the quiet. Outside, the world kept turning, cars passed, laughter drifted from a neighbor's yard, somewhere a dog barked. Life didn't pause for heartbreak. I picked up my sketch pad and flipped to a blank page. I started drawing without thinking, the outline of an old house, cracked foundation, missing windows, but still standing. I shaded the cracks, then traced a faint golden line along them, like the Japanese art of mending pottery with gold. Maybe that's what I'd been doing all these years, fixing everyone else's breaks while ignoring my own. The phone vibrated one more time. A new message lit up the screen. It was from Claire, my closest friend since college. Asterisk. "You're not gonna believe what I just saw about your sister's fiancé." Asterisk. I stared at the text until my wine glass trembled in my hand. Then I set it down slowly. Outside, thunder rolled across the harbor. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I whispered to the quiet room, "This time I won't fix what they've broken." And for the first time in my life, the silence that followed didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. The road to Savannah stretched long and straight beneath a gray morning sky. Spanish moss dripped from the oak trees, swaying over the cracked two-lane highway. I hadn't driven this route in years, but the turns came back like muscle memory. Every curve, every weathered barn, every sign pointing toward the neighborhood I used to call home. It took 2 hours from Charleston. 2 hours of replaying Mom's voice in my head. Times, "Don't make this about you, dear." Asterisk. Every mile closer, my grip on the steering wheel tightened. When the cream-colored house came into view, my chest clenched. The same wraparound porch, the same chipping shutters. Mom had repainted the porch rails white, but the boards still sagged in the same places. A row of yellow chrysanthemums lined the front walk, planted too precisely to be warm. The old "Home Sweet Home" sign hung crooked by one nail, the paint faded by sun and years. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, engine humming, watching the curtains in the living room twitch. She knew I was here. She always did. A message from Claire blinked on my phone screen. Times. "You need to see this in person." Asterisk. I exhaled, stepped out of the car, and the smell of cut grass hit me like déjà vu. Somewhere, a wind chime sang faintly. Nothing had changed, and that was somehow worse. In the garage, Dad was bent over the hood of his old Mustang, wiping the metal with a grease-stained rag. He looked up only when I stopped at the edge of the driveway. "Your mother's inside," he said, not meeting my eyes. "She always is." He nodded once, like we'd completed a transaction. His hair had gone thinner, grayer. The man who once built kites with me in the backyard now looked like someone who avoided open skies. "You've been working on the car for what, 20 years?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Some things take time. Some things never get fixed," I said, and walked past him toward the porch. The wooden steps creaked under my feet, the same sound that used to follow me on nights I crept downstairs to eavesdrop on their arguments. Inside the house smelled of lemon cleaner and something too sweet, like air freshener masking rot. Mom was waiting in the kitchen doorway, smile perfectly placed. Oh, Maddie, what a surprise. There was a pie cooling on the counter, coffee already poured. She was wearing her pearls, the ones she saved for guests and forgiveness scenes. I was just about to call you, she said. Save it, I replied. I just want to know why. Why, what, dear? I stepped farther in. Every wall was crowded with framed photos, Lily and Ryan on the beach. Lily with the kids' mom and dad at the cafe Lily once owned. Not a single one of me. I pointed toward a collage above the fireplace. You must have run out of room. Her smile faltered. You never sent me updated pictures. I didn't realize I had to apply for space. She sighed, reaching for the coffee pot. You sound tired, sweetheart. Sit down, have a piece of pie. I stayed standing. I'm not here for pie. I'm here because my sister is getting married and somehow forgot to mention it. She placed the coffee on the table, hands trembling slightly. Lily's been under stress. You know how sensitive she is. Sensitive enough to plan a 200-guest wedding without telling her only sister. Don't make this about you, dear, she said softly. Ryan thinks family should bring joy, not conflict. That name made my stomach turn. I remembered him at Thanksgiving, charming, practice too polished. And the way he'd looked at me when I asked about his consulting business, that flash of irritation he tried to disguise as a smile. Joy, I repeated. You mean the kind of joy that comes from lying. She bristled. Must you always be so harsh? You've been successful, independent. You don't understand how fragile things can be for Lily. I paid $25,000 to clean up her fragile cafe after she ran it into the ground, I said. I babysat her kids when her husband walked out. I covered her tuition loans. But sure, let's talk about how I'm the problem. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, as if Dad might rescue her from this conversation. I'm sorry if you feel excluded, she said, rehearsed and hollow. But we had to think about what was best for Lily. Not for your other daughter. Don't twist this, Maddie, she snapped, her voice dropping its sweetness. You've always had everything under control. Lily needs more support. She needs understanding. Understanding, I said slowly. Is that what we're calling favoritism now? Her mouth tightened. Ryan said you were judgmental. I told him you'd come around once you met him properly. Ryan said that. She nodded. He feels you don't trust him, and it makes Lily anxious. You questioned his work. He's an engineer, Maddie, not a criminal. Maybe not yet, I murmured. Dad appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. Maybe we could all calm down. I turned to him. You've been calm for 35 years, Dad. Look where it got us. He looked down as always. I wondered if he'd ever learned to meet conflict head-on, or if avoidance had simply become his language. Mom busied herself refilling the sugar bowl, pretending she hadn't heard. I know you, Maddie. You'll regret this attitude when the wedding's over. I won't be there to regret it. Her shoulders stiffened. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm reacting exactly as someone does when they realize their family has been rewriting history without them. Her eyes softened with something close to pity, the kind she used to use when I cried as a child. We're family, she whispered. That doesn't change. Family doesn't erase someone like a stain on a tablecloth. The silence that followed was heavy, final. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to pause. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Mom called out, "Don't walk away from this conversation." I'm not walking away, I said without turning. I'm leaving the museum. The screen door slammed behind me. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain. I walked down the steps and across the yard, my shoes sinking into the damp grass. Madeline. Dad's voice stopped me halfway to the car. He jogged after me out of breath, the towel still clutched in his hand. Maddie, he said, lowering his voice, there's something you should know about Ryan. I froze. What about him? Before he could answer, the front door swung open. Edward, Mom's voice cut sharp through the air. Not a word. He flinched, eyes darting between us. Rain began to fall thin and cold. "Dad," I said quietly, "what is it?" He hesitated, then looked at the ground. "Just be careful," he whispered. Mom's silhouette filled the doorway, arms crossed. The light from inside spilled onto the porch, casting long shadows across the yard. "Come inside," she ordered. "You'll catch cold." He didn't move. For a moment it looked like he might speak again, might finally stand between us. But then he turned back toward the house. I watched him disappear into the glow of the doorway, into her world of porcelain smiles and controlled narratives. The light inside flickered once, twice, then steadied. The storm outside grew louder, wind whipping through the chrysanthemums. I got into my car, started the engine, and glanced at the house one last time. Behind the window, my mother's silhouette stood framed by light, perfect and immovable. Then I drove into the dark, the rain swallowing the sound of home behind me. Rain streaked across the windshield, distorting the glow of the streetlights into ribbons of gold and red. The wipers squeaked in protest, keeping rhythm with the low jazz humming from the radio. I drove without thinking, my hands locked on the steering wheel, my phone buzzing endlessly in the cup holder. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 text from Dad times "sorry for today, asterisk." I didn't reply. The word sorry meant nothing in that house. By the time I reached Charleston, the storm had thinned to a mist. My street was quiet, lined with oaks heavy with Spanish moss. I parked in front of my small craftsman home and sat for a moment, watching the porch light flicker through the drizzle. The house glowed warm and steady, like it always did, a place that had never lied to me. Inside, I kicked off my wet shoes and dropped my keys on the counter. The air smelled faintly of cedar and paint thinner from the restoration work I'd started last month. My phone buzzed again. "Mom times. Please don't let this ruin things between us. Asterisk. Another times, you're still invited to the brunch after the wedding. Asterisk." I turned the screen face down. I opened a bottle of Cabernet, poured a glass, and set it beside the window without drinking. Outside, the rain shimmered against the streetlights, soft and constant. The silence in the room felt earned. When the phone vibrated again, I let it. By morning, the messages had stopped. The next day, I drove downtown to the Copperfinch Cafe. The air smelled of espresso and cinnamon, the kind of place that made time slow down. Claire was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a messy bun. She grinned when she saw me, but her eyes flicked to the circles under mine. "Still pretending you're fine?" she asked, setting a cappuccino in front of me. "Pretending's my family's specialty," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. She snorted. "You want to talk about it, or sit here in elegant silence?" "Silence," I said, but she pulled out a chair anyway. "Look," she said after a moment, lowering her voice. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but you need to see." She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a photo Granny taken at the Blue Orchid Lounge, the bar near the waterfront. Ryan Mercer sat at a corner booth, arm around a blonde woman in a sequined dress, his mouth pressed against her neck. In another photo, his hand rested on her thigh, the engagement ring glittering under the neon light. My stomach twisted, but there was no shock, only confirmation. Claire swiped to the next image, a video this time. Ryan at the bar, laughing with the bartender. "Don't tell anyone," he said, handing over a credit card. "I'm celebrating early." The bartender nodded, sliding the card back times. "Mercer Pharmaceuticals corporate account. Asterisk." Claire's eyes searched mine. "You're gonna tell your sister, right?" I stared at the phone. "No." She blinked. "No. I'm not doing this again. Maddie. Every time Lily gets herself into a mess, I'm the one who swoops in. I'm the cleaner, the fixer." I pushed the phone back toward her. "I'm done." She sat back, arms crossed. "That's not like you." "Maybe that's the point," I said quietly. I stared out the cafe window. A mother and child crossed the street, sharing an umbrella too small for both of them. I used to envy that kind of closeness before I realized love without honesty isn't shelter, it's suffocation. Claire reached out, resting her hand over mine. You're allowed to stop saving people, Maddie. Just make sure you're not confusing peace with revenge. I smiled faintly. Maybe they're the same thing depending on who deserves it. That afternoon I returned home to find my inbox full. Most were from Mom. Asterisk. We just want you to be happy for Lily. Asterisk, asterisk. Ryan's family are wonderful people. Please don't start drama. Asterisk, asterisk. You'll regret staying away. Asterisk. There was another email, this one from the bank, forwarded automatically from my old joint account with Dad. Asterisk, mortgage payment past due. Cooper residence. Asterisk. I frowned. They'd told me the house was long paid off. Another lie. I flagged the message, meaning to revisit it later, but exhaustion settled like lead behind my eyes. I took my laptop to the couch, intending to work. Instead, I stared at the blank screen, wine glass in hand, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. I thought of Lily, her soft laugh, her constant chaos, her way of drawing sympathy like moths to light. Every disaster she'd had, I'd cleaned up. Every broken promise, I'd patched. When we were little, Mom used to say times, "That's what good sisters do." Asterisk, but good sisters don't erase themselves to keep the peace. Claire's words echoed back, times. Make sure you're not confusing peace with revenge. Asterisk. Maybe peace meant finally letting the consequences arrive on their own. As the sun went down, the sky turned the color of rust and honey. I poured another glass of wine and carried it to the armchair by the window. Outside, the Ashley River shimmered with the reflection of nearby restaurant lights, warm, distant, perfect. Let them have their perfect day, I whispered. I'm done fixing what's broken. I sat there for a long time, the glass untouched, my thoughts moving in quiet, deliberate circles. For once, there was no anger, only calm. By 11, I'd shut off all the lights, except the one by the window. My phone lay face down on the table, silent. The house was still breathing with me. When the vibration started, it took me a moment to realize it wasn't the hum of the refrigerator, it was the phone again. I reached for it, ready to turn it off. One new message. Unknown number. Asterisk. You don't know me, but you should stop your sister's wedding before it's too late. Asterisk. Attached below was a video file still downloading, the thumbnail frozen at 98%. The sender's tag. Red Times, from HR Department, Mercer Pharmaceuticals. Asterisk. The progress bar crept forward 1 pixel at a time. Outside, thunder rolled over the water. I stared at the screen, heart suddenly steady, as if my body already knew what the video would show. Too late, I whispered. But my thumb hovered over the play button anyway. The video began buffering halfway through the pixelated screen, flashing Ryan's voice in fragments. If the audit gets out, we're both done. The Coopers can't know. Then static and silence. I stared at the paused frame until the light from my laptop burned my eyes. The text had come from an anonymous number hours earlier, times, from HR Department, Mercer Pharmaceuticals. Asterisk, no greeting, no explanation, just the file and a warning. My finger hovered over the replay button, but I didn't need to hear it again. I'd caught enough. Ryan, my sister's perfect fiancé, was hiding something. By morning, I was pacing the floor of the Copper Finch Cafe. Claire slid a mug toward me, the steam curling up between us. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't. I turned the laptop toward her. Watch. She leaned in, brow furrowing as the video played. He's arguing with someone from his office, she murmured. And he says your family's name. Yeah, I shut the laptop. And the company he works for, Mercer Pharmaceuticals, they're under audit for financial fraud. This can't be a coincidence. Claire blinked, lowering her voice. You think he's using your dad? I don't know. But last night I checked the corporate filings. There's a loan under the name times Edward Cooper times my father. He's a retired mechanic, Claire. He hasn't had a business in 20 years. She frowned. You think Ryan forged it? I think my parents helped him. The words tasted bitter even as I said them. Claire sat back. That's a serious accusation. So is fraud. For a while, neither of us spoke. The cafe filled with the soft hiss of milk steaming and a faint jazz tune from the speakers. Outside Charleston's morning light shimmered on wet cobblestones. Finally, Claire said, "You need to talk to your dad." I nodded. "I will." Driving home, I replayed the video in my head. Ryan's voice wasn't panicked. It was calculated like a man who'd rehearsed his lies. That evening, I called Dad. He answered on the second ring, voice low and tired. "Maddie." "Dad, I need to ask you something. Did you co-sign a loan with Ryan?" Silence. A long, heavy one. "Dad." He exhaled. "It's not what you think." "So you did." He said it was just a short-term business thing to help your sister buy a home after the divorce. He promised to pay it back. He even said it would make Lily's credit better. "Did you read what you signed?" I trusted him. I gripped the steering wheel. "You trusted the man who didn't even invite your daughter to his wedding." His voice broke. "Please don't tell your mother. She's had enough." "She's the one I should be asking, Dad. Who convinced you this was smart?" He didn't answer. Just the faint sound of him breathing the weight of decades of silence pressing between us. I hung up before I started yelling. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk searching Mercer's records online until the blue light blurred my vision. Page after page of shell companies, real estate transfers, consulting firms, all circling back to one name: Times, Cooper Holdings, LLC. Asterisk. The registered address matched my parents' house in Savannah. I felt sick. A new email appeared in my inbox at 2:14 a.m. Asterisk. Meet me. I have proof. HR department. Asterisk. The message included an address to a small bar near the industrial district. By sunset the next day, I was there. The place smelled like spilled beer and old secrets. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a Mercer badge on her jacket slid into the seat across from me. "You're Madeline Cooper," she said, not asking. "Yes." "I'm Nancy. I used to work in HR, until I asked the wrong questions." She dropped a flash drive on the table. "Ryan Mercer used employee data to open personal credit lines. Your father's name was one of them. He funneled the money through an account labeled Times Cooper Holdings. Asterisk. When the audit started, he panicked." I stared at the flash drive. "Why send this to me?" "Because people like him always hide behind family. They make you complicit before you realize it." Her tone softened. "I saw your sister's wedding on the news. I figured you deserved the truth." I left the bar with the drive in my pocket, the night air thick around me. Back home, I plugged it into my computer. Folders, open spreadsheets, transaction lists, internal memos. I scrolled until I saw at Times beneficiary Edward Cooper. Asterisk. My father's name. My family's shame. I pressed record on my phone and read the screen out loud, documenting every line. Fraud wasn't just rumor anymore, it was fact. A message popped up as I worked. Times mom calling. Asterisk. I hesitated, then answered. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I heard you've been asking questions. Please stop digging." "Why, so no one finds out you helped Ryan steal money?" Her breath caught. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You didn't want another scandal after Lily's wedding disaster. Maddie, for your sister's sake." "For your own sake, you mean?" Her voice turned cold. "If you love this family, you'll let it go." I almost laughed. "You taught me that love meant silence, Mom. I'm unlearning that." Click. The line went dead. For a moment, I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain start against the windows. The city outside hummed softly, the sound of traffic and thunder mixing into something raw and real. On the desk, the flash drive's light blinked faintly, a heartbeat in plastic. I closed my laptop and whispered to the empty room. They built everything on lies. Then I reached for my phone, opened my camera, and took pictures of every document, each line of data, each forged signature, each falsified address. My fingers didn't shake this time. I created a folder, labeled it Times Truth Times, and sent a copy to Claire with a short message. "Times, keep this safe. Asterisk. When the email sent, I turned off all the lights, except for the lamp on my desk. In its soft glow, the papers looked almost peaceful, like relics finally allowed to breathe. Outside rain slicked the streets of Charleston, turning every reflection into liquid gold. For years, I'd been the one holding our family together, patching holes, smoothing over cracks. But some foundations shouldn't be repaired, they should be torn down. I sat back listening to the rain and let the weight of it all settle. The truth wasn't freedom yet. But it was the first honest sound in a house built entirely on noise. The morning started with the sound of notifications. My phone buzzed non-stop across the counter while I waited for my coffee to brew. I told myself not to look, but curiosity won. The screen lit up with a dozen new posts under the hashtag *** Lily and Ryan forever. ***. The first video showed Lily laughing as makeup artists dusted shimmer across her cheeks. The next clip panned across Ridgewood Estates' marble hallways, our mother supervising florists, directing lighting, adjusting ribbons. 2 days until the big day someone squealed behind the camera. Every frame was a celebration of family, of unity, of perfection. And not one included me. I scrolled past the photos of Mom and Dad standing by the archway of white roses, their hands entwined like a couple who'd done everything right. Someone had commented times, "Beautiful family, you can tell they're so close." I set my phone down and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. "Some families are just better at pretending," I whispered. Outside, the Charleston air was already heavy with humidity. I pulled on a denim jacket, trying to shake off the buzzing in my chest, but the silence inside the house only made it worse. By noon, I found myself back at Copper Finch, the one place that still felt steady. Claire slid a cup of espresso toward me before I even sat down. "You look like someone debating between murder and meditation," she said. "Closer to the second," I muttered. "Maybe." She sat opposite, watching me stir the foam without drinking. "Did you see the wedding post?" "They're everywhere," I said. "Every detail is perfect. The flowers, the setup, the guests. Even Dad looks proud." Claire leaned forward. "And you? What are you going to do about it?" I stared into the dark swirl of my coffee. "Nothing." Her brows shot up. "Nothing? You have evidence that her fiancé's a fraud, and you're just going to watch them say, 'I do.' I'm done saving people who don't want to be saved." Claire crossed her arms. "Since when do you do nothing?" "Since I realized that fixing them means breaking myself." She studied me quietly. "You're sure about that?" I nodded, though it didn't feel certain, only necessary. The cafe door chimed as a couple walked in laughing. Claire sighed. "Maybe being the villain would suit you, Maddie. At least villains don't apologize for knowing the truth." "Maybe," I said, finally taking a sip. It was bitter and strong, the way reality always tastes. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. "Mom." Against better judgment, I answered. "Maddie, honey, I wanted to check in," she began, voice syrupy. "Lily really hopes you'll come on Saturday. She said she misses you." "Come where exactly?" I asked. "The wedding I wasn't invited to." "Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. It's all a misunderstanding. You've been so busy." "Busy fixing the damage you and Ryan caused." A pause, sharp as a knife's edge. "You've been talking to people again." "I've been talking to the truth, Mom. Turns out, it speaks louder than you." Her tone hardened. "Don't bring your negativity into Lily's happiness. This is her moment." I laughed softly. "Right. And God forbid the truth ruin the photo ops." "Maddie." I ended the call before she could finish. The line clicked silent. Outside, clouds gathered over the harbor, dark and thick. I opened the window, letting the air rush in. It smelled like rain, like change. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at 2 open files on my laptop. One was labeled Times Wedding Invitation.jpg*. The other Times Evidence Ryan Fraud. MP4*. My cursor hovered between them. The storm outside cracked open, thunder rolling through the house. If I expose him, I destroy her, I whispered. If I stay silent, I destroy myself. Lightning lit up the room, washing everything in white. I closed the laptop. Not tonight. The next morning I drove to Folly Beach. The tide was high, the sky gray. Waves crashed close to my feet, cool spray touching my skin. I sat on the sand, knees pulled to my chest, and watched the horizon. When I was little, Dad used to bring me here on weekends. He'd say times, "The ocean knows when to push and when to pull back." Asterisk. Back then, I never understood. Now I did. Pulling back wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. I picked up a smooth shell, tracing the crack down its center. "You held anyway," I murmured, pocketing it. Driving home, I felt lighter. At dusk, I began cleaning my phone. I unfollowed every account tied to the wedding-muted family group chats, deleted messages from Mom without reading them. Each swipe was a small rebellion. When I finished, the screen was nearly empty. My wallpaper reflected only the quiet blue of the evening sky. That silence didn't scare me anymore. Just before midnight, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. Crickets hummed in the grass. Somewhere music drifted from a neighbor's backyard, a slow old tune about letting go. I thought of Lily as a child twirling in our living room with a bedsheet for a veil. She'd begged me to play the groom, promising I could be the cool sister forever. Funny how forever turns into silence. The wine warmed my chest, but it didn't blur my thoughts. For the first time, I felt clarity, not anger. My phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it until it buzzed again. Then again. A message appeared from the same unknown number that had sent me the first video. Asterisk. "He's moving money tonight. Check the Ridgewood account. And whatever happens this weekend, don't go." Asterisk. Attached was a GPS pin right at the back entrance of Ridgewood Estate. I stared at the screen, pulse rising. Rain began again, soft at first, then harder, drumming on the roof like warning knocks. I didn't move. I just let the storm fill the room, the lightning flash across the window. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. Another vibration, one final text. Asterisk. "You were right not to trust him." Asterisk. I turned the phone face down. The message glowed through the glass table, faint but persistent. Some truths reveal themselves without asking for permission. I took one last sip of wine and whispered to the dark tomorrow, "Let the storm have him." Then I blew out the candle, leaving the house in perfect, deliberate quiet. The rain started again just after 9, soft at first, then pounding hard enough to blur the Charleston skyline. I sat in my car at the end of the gravel road leading to Ridgewood Estate, wipers beating in a slow rhythm. The GPS pin on my phone glowed bright against the darkness. "He's moving money tonight," the message had said. I hadn't told Claire. I hadn't told anyone. The rational part of me screamed to go home, to let the police or karma handle Ryan Mercer. But curiosity and something colder, heavier, pulled me forward. The iron gates of Ridgewood loomed ahead, slick with rain. The estate was silent except for the hum of distant generators and the storm. I parked behind a row of oak trees, pulled my hood tight, and started walking. Water seeped into my shoes, and the mud sucked at every step. From this distance, the mansion looked like a storybook, painting arched windows, glowing chandeliers, perfect symmetry. Tomorrow it would host 200 guests. Tonight it was a hollow shell filled with secrets. I slipped around the side path that led toward the service entrance. The back door was unlocked. Inside, faint light spilled from an office down the hall. Voices echoed, muffled but tense. I crept closer, heart thudding in time with the thunder. Ryan's voice cut through the rain. "It's all there. You can tell your boss to stop worrying until after the wedding." A woman answered, sharp and angry. "You used Cooper's accounts. If this leaks, we're both finished." My stomach turned. It was the same woman from the earlier video, the blonde with the red lipstick. Ryan's voice dropped lower. "Then we both go down together." I inched closer and peered through the crack of the door. He stood by the desk in a soaked shirt, waving a manila folder. The woman snatched it from him and opened it, pages spilling onto the floor. I lifted my phone, hit record, and zoomed in. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their faces. Ryan's expression was tight, desperate, not love, not guilt, just fear of exposure. "I told you to shut down Cooper Holdings weeks ago," she hissed. "I couldn't," he shot back. "Edward wouldn't sign off." "Then forge it." "Too late now," he snapped. "The money's already transferred." The words punched the air out of me. The woman shoved the folder back at him. "You're insane. I'm not taking the fall for this." "You already have," he said, smirking. "That video of us think I didn't keep a copy." She froze. The power dynamic shifted in an instant, and I realized Ryan wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. My phone trembled in my hand, but I kept recording. The woman stormed out, heels clicking down the marble hallway. Ryan cursed under his breath and kicked the desk. I ducked behind a column as he stalked toward the door. The rain outside drowned out everything but my own heartbeat. He passed within a few feet of me, muttering, "Tomorrow it all disappears." All of it. When he was gone, I slipped into the office. Papers littered the floor, bank receipts, wiring instructions, contracts. One document caught my eye, a property title under Times Cooper Holdings LLC Times, listing my parents' home address in Savannah. I snapped photos of every page, fingers shaking but steady enough to get it all. Then I saw the signatures. Asterisk Edward Cooper, asterisk asterisk Patricia Cooper, asterisk asterisk Ryan Mercer, asterisk. The blood rushed in my ears. He dragged my parents into this, not as victims, but as camouflage. Their names made his fraud look legitimate. A sound behind me made me spin around. Ryan stood at the doorway, eyes cold. "You shouldn't be here, Maddie." The phone nearly slipped from my grip. "Neither should you." He stepped inside, rain dripping from his collar. "You think you know what you're doing, but you don't. You'll ruin your family if you keep digging." "They already ruined themselves," I said quietly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Walk away while you can. You don't want to end up like your sister." That stopped me. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged. "You'll see." He turned and walked out, his footsteps fading down the hall. I stood frozen for a moment, then shoved the papers into my bag and ran. Outside, the storm had turned wild. The wind whipped branches sideways as I sprinted across the wet grass toward the tree line. I didn't stop until the estate lights disappeared behind me. At my car, I sat shaking, soaked to the bone. My phone buzzed again, a message from Claire. Asterisk. "You okay, asterisk?" I typed Times, "Just getting there. Will explain later." Asterisk. Then attached the video and photos. Asterisk. "If anything happens to me, send these to the police." Asterisk. Her reply came fast. Asterisk, "Maddie, what the hell did you do?" Asterisk. I didn't answer. The rain eased to a drizzle as I pulled onto the main road. In the rear-view mirror, the mansion stood glowing against the dark horizon, beautiful and rotten at its core. By the time I reached home, dawn was starting to gray the sky. My clothes clung to my skin and the floor puddled beneath me as I stepped inside. I dropped the bag on the table, opened my laptop, and watched the recording. Ryan's voice, the threats, the papers, all of it was there. Proof. I sent a copy to a private drive, labeled it Times for Truth, asterisk, then closed the lid. The house was silent, except for the steady drip of rain from my jacket to the hardwood floor. I stood by the window, staring toward the horizon where light was starting to break through. Tomorrow, 200 guests would gather under those chandeliers to toast forever. Thunder rumbled, faintly distant, now almost gentle. My phone buzzed one last time, Mom's name on the screen. I let it ring until voicemail kicked in. Her message came through seconds later, soft and tired. "Promise me you won't come tomorrow, Maddie. Please." I looked out at the rain streaking down the glass, the first hint of sunrise, catching on each drop like silver. "I wasn't planning to," I whispered. But when I turned back toward my desk, a new notification blinked on my phone. Asterisk, asterisk. Live Ridgewood wedding. Lily Cooper and Ryan Mercer. Asterisk, asterisk. The title glowed in white letters across the screen as if mocking me. I reached for my glass of wine, took a long sip and whispered to no one, "Let the truth do the talking." Then I set the phone face down and let the morning light spill across the room, bright and unflinching, as the storm outside began to fade. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter, turning my coffee cold before I ever touched it. The TV hummed quietly in the background, local news anchors chatting about the most anticipated wedding of the year. Ridgewood Estate gleamed on the screen, all white roses and gold ribbons, as if the night before had never happened. I stood there barefoot, watching Lily step out of a white limousine, her dress flaring like a cloud. The reporter's voice was syrup smooth. A beautiful day for the Cooper-Mercer union. A celebration of love and family. Family. The word almost made me laugh. I turned off the sound, but the images kept moving. Smiles, champagne glasses, flashes from photographers. Mom looked radiant and Silver Dad stiff, in a new suit, both pretending our world wasn't built on deceit. I reached for my phone, half to shut everything out. Instead, the screen flooded with posts, photos, live streams, hashtags, asterisk number Lily and Ryan forever, asterisk number Ridgewood romance, asterisk. My feed was a gallery of perfection, everyone else basking in the lie. Claire called before I could put the phone down. "You're watching it, aren't you?" I tried not to, I said. Her sigh crackled through the speaker. "You could have stopped it, Maddie." "They didn't want me there to stop it," I said quietly. "They wanted silence." There was a pause. "You think silence will save them?" "I think truth will find them anyway." I hung up before she could argue. Outside, the sky was blindingly blue, too bright for the kind of day it was about to become. I sat on the couch, the phone in my hand, the Ridgewood livestream playing despite myself. Guests milled under the estate's sprawling oak trees. The music swelled, violins trembling with fake joy. Lily appeared at the top of the grand staircase, veil floating behind her like smoke. Ryan waited at the altar, smiling, as if nothing in the world could touch him. My throat tightened. I remembered the video from his office, his words dripping arrogance times the Coopers can't know, asterisk. Now under those chandeliers he was marrying into the very family he'd used to cover his crimes. I turned off the sound again. Without it, the entire scene looked like a silent film, beautiful, distant, unreal. When the ceremony ended, the reception began and the posts multiplied. My phone buzzed non-stop times. "What a dream wedding, asterisk, asterisk. Fairy tale couple, asterisk, asterisk. Perfect day for the Coopers, asterisk." I poured a glass of wine, though it was barely noon. Half an hour later, Claire texted Times. "You need to see this. Check Instagram Live, asterisk." I clicked the link. The image shook as if someone was filming with trembling hands. Guests crowded the ballroom, their laughter rising under the chandelier light. Then, chaos. A video projected onto a large screen, grainy but unmistakable. Ryan's voice. "If the audit gets out, we're both done. The Coopers can't know." Gasps rippled through the room. Lily's face went pale. The video cut replayed, then froze. Someone shouted. The camera on the live stream turned, catching everything, the confusion, the whispers, the fury building behind Lily's eyes. "Who showed you that?" Ryan barked, stepping toward her. "You knew I'd find out," Lily shouted back, voice shaking. "You weren't even careful." The crowd pulled back, a sea of pastel dresses and stunned faces. "You're overreacting," Ryan snapped, his mask cracking. Lily's hand flew up, pointing at him. "You used my family. You used my father. You think no one would find out," he sneered. "You wanted a fairy tale, Lily. I just gave you one." And then in front of everyone, he slapped her. The sound echoed through the ballroom, clear and sharp, even through my tiny phone speaker. Gasps erupted. A woman screamed. The camera jolted sideways. "Oh my God," I whispered, wine glass trembling in my hand. The live stream cut out. My phone buzzed again, text pouring in from everyone I knew. Asterisk. "Are you seeing this? Asterisk, asterisk. It's all over the news. Asterisk, asterisk. Your family's wedding just exploded online. Asterisk." I turned on the TV. The local station was already looping the footage. Headline, flashing asterisk asterisk Ridgewood wedding turns, violent groom under investigation, asterisk asterisk. Reporters spoke over chaotic video clips. Ryan shouting, police lights flashing outside the estate, Lily crying in her mother's arms while photographers swarmed. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt vindicated. The doorbell rang. I didn't move. It rang again. When I finally opened it, Mrs. Henderson stood there clutching her phone. "Dear, I just saw the news. Are you—" "I'm fine," I said softly. "Better than most of them, I think." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Sometimes God doesn't need our help to set things right. After she left, I went back inside and muted the television. The images kept playing: Lily's tear-streaked face, Mom's shock, Dad's helpless stance. My phone vibrated in my hand. Mom calling. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then answered. "Maddie," she sobbed. "Your sister's hurt. Please come." I closed my eyes. The words I'd said all my life rose to the surface. Times "I'll fix it. I'll help. I'll come." Asterisk. But this time they didn't leave my mouth. I wasn't invited, remember? Her voice cracked. "Please don't be cruel." "I'm not being cruel," I said. "I'm being consistent. Maddie, she needs you. She's at the hospital. Mom, she needed me months ago. You all did. You just didn't want me until it was convenient." She went silent. "I'm sorry she got hurt," I said, finally softer now. "But maybe now you understand what happens when you silence the only person willing to tell the truth." The line went dead. I looked down at the phone. 66 missed calls, most from family, some from reporters. My inbox flooded with links, photos, gossip. My entire family's collapse was trending. I turned the phone face down on the counter. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, the late afternoon sky turned a deep gold. I opened the windows, letting the warm air in, the scent of rain still lingering from the night before. For the first time in months, my house didn't feel haunted. It felt safe. I poured another glass of wine and stood by the window. Somewhere, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, ambulances, police, or maybe just echoes of a day finally breaking apart. I raised my glass slightly, a quiet toast to no one. "Here's to the truth," I said. "It doesn't need witnesses." Then I sank into my chair and watched the sunlight fade, the world outside spinning without me. When my phone lit up again, I didn't answer. Some storms were never meant to be stopped. The knock came just as the rain started again, soft but steady against the windows. I ignored it at first, assuming it was a neighbor. Then came a second knock, heavier this time, followed by my father's voice. "Maddie, it's me." I froze halfway between the kitchen and the hallway. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then another knock, quiet, tired. "Please open the door." When I did, he stood there, soaked through rainwater running down his face, a manila envelope clutched to his chest. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, hands trembling. "Dad," I said. He gave a faint nod. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside, letting him in. The house filled with the scent of wet pavement and guilt. I handed him a towel and motioned toward the kitchen table. He sat, envelope still in hand, staring at it like it might bite. For a while we said nothing. The kettle hissed softly as I made tea. He looked around the room as if memorizing it, eyes lingering on the half-finished sketches on my counter, the restoration plans for a house I hadn't started yet. Finally he said, "We used your money." My stomach dropped. "What?" "The checks you sent. Every month," his voice cracked. "It wasn't for the mortgage like we said. It went to pay the loan Ryan arranged. The one tied to your mother's name." The one for Lily's house. I gripped the edge of the table. Dad, that's… I know, he whispered. I know what it is. He opened the envelope and slid out the documents. Bank statements, loan agreements, notices stamped times, foreclosure pending, asterisk. The numbers swam in front of me, $195,000. My father's signature, my mother's handwriting, my name forged on 2 of the forms. The room seemed to shrink. I trusted him, Dad said. He said it was temporary, that it would make things easier for Lily. He said it was safe. Ryan said that. He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. He made it sound like he was doing us a favor. Your mother wanted to believe him. I didn't ask enough questions. You didn't ask any, I snapped. He flinched but didn't argue. For a long moment the only sound was the rain. I looked down at the papers at my own forged signature, written with elegant precision. She forged this, I said quietly. Dad swallowed. Your mother said it was just a formality. The bank needed reassurance. I laughed bitterly. A formality? You both lied to me for 4 years. I sent you money every month thinking I was helping keep the house. You were paying off his scam. His eyes were wet, not just from the rain. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Of course you didn't. You never do. He leaned forward, voice shaking. Maddie, we're going to lose the house. The bank's foreclosing. Then maybe it's time, I said. You can't keep building your life on lies and call it family. He looked at me then, the way fathers look at daughters when they finally see the woman they made small. Your mother thought she was protecting us, he said. She was protecting her pride, I replied. He nodded once like he'd been waiting to hear me say it. Then he slid the envelope toward me. Do what you need to do. I didn't answer. I just stared at the papers, the ink bleeding slightly where rain had smudged it. My name, fake and real, blurred together until I could barely tell the difference. When the kettle whistled, I poured 2 cups of tea. Neither of us drank. I called the bank this morning, he said after a while. They said the full balance is due, $70,000. They'll take the house if we don't pay by the end of the week. I stared at him, almost numb. You want me to fix it? No, he said quietly. I came because I couldn't live with the lie anymore. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. Good. Because I'm not fixing this. He didn't argue. Maybe he knew better now. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, took out my phone, and began photographing each page. Flash, click, flash. The sound was sharp and final. He watched in silence. What are you doing? He asked. Documenting fraud. He closed his eyes. It would destroy your mother. Then she shouldn't have destroyed me first. When I finished, I slid the papers back into the envelope. You should leave. He stood slowly, picking up his coat. I don't blame you for hating us. I don't hate you, I said. I just finally believe you. That broke him. His shoulders sagged, and for a second I saw the man who used to fix my bike and carry me on his back to the pier. I looked away before I could soften. At the door he hesitated. What will you do? What you should have done, I said. Tell the truth. He nodded and stepped out into the rain. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, heart hammering. The air in the house felt heavier, as if the truth itself had mass. The documents lay on the table like ghosts. I picked up the last page and read the small print at the bottom times. Foreclosure hearing scheduled in 7 days, asterisk. 7 days. I dropped into the chair and stared at the rain-streaked window. For years I'd carried their guilt like an anchor. Tonight, I decided to let it sink without me. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to the bank's fraud department. Subject line times identity forgery and misuse of funds, asterisk. My fingers moved steadily faster than my thoughts. Every word I typed lifted a weight. When I hit send, the quiet that followed didn't feel empty, it felt earned. I sat back, drained the rain outside, softening to a whisper. My tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. It tasted bitter but clean. For the first time since the wedding, since the lies began unraveling, I didn't feel like the fixer or the villain, just a woman with the truth finally in her hands. The thunder rolled again in the distance. I stood and looked out into the storm. 7 days, I said aloud. Let's rebuild on truth. And for once I meant it. Saturday morning arrived gray and quiet, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I laid the papers out across the oak dining table, the same one that had hosted birthdays, Christmas dinners, and countless lies. The surface gleamed under the light, every document arranged like evidence at a trial. For 30 years, this table had heard excuses. Today, it would hear the truth. I'd invited them 2 days ago, a short message with no room for negotiation, times be here at noon, all of you, asterisk. By 11:30, I was pacing the kitchen, my stomach, a knot of coffee and nerves. The first knock came exactly on time. When I opened the door, Aunt Ruth stood there, wrapped in her old tweed coat, hair pinned up like always. You look like you haven't slept, she said, kissing my cheek. I haven't, I admitted. Good, she said. Means you're ready. Behind her came my father, hat in hand, eyes down. My mother followed, wearing a pressed blouse and pearls, her armor of composure still intact. Lily trailed last, her face pale beneath oversized sunglasses. No one spoke as they stepped inside. Come in, I said, closing the door. We'll start right away. They filed into the dining room. Aunt Ruth poured coffee, no one touched. My parents sat side by side, hands folded. Lily sat apart, twisting a tissue in her lap. This isn't an ambush, I said. It's accountability. My mother bristled. Madeline, if this is about money, it's about truth, I interrupted. I turned the laptop toward them and pressed play. The video from Ridgewood's office filled the room, Ryan's voice, the argument, the confession. My parents' faces drained of color as his words echoed asterisk. You used Cooper's accounts asterisk. When the clip ended, the silence was so deep, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Then I placed the next piece of evidence on the table, bank statements, notarized signatures, the forged documents. These are from your loan, I said, the one tied to Cooper Holdings. The one using my name. Dad's eyes flickered to Mom. She kept staring straight ahead. I already spoke to the bank, I continued. The line of credit was opened 4 years ago using fraudulent information. You both knew Ryan was behind it. Mom's voice was thin. We didn't want to burden you. You forged my signature, I said. You already had. Her lip trembled, but her voice sharpened. We did it for Lily. She needed a home after her divorce. Lily looked up, startled. What? You didn't tell her, I asked, incredulous. You made her part of it without her knowing. Mom's mask cracked. She was struggling. Ryan promised stability. You thought lying was easier than asking for help, I cut in. Aunt Ruth leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Patricia, she deserves the truth. We all do. Mom's chin lifted. You've always taken Maddie's side. Ruth's eyes hardened. No, I take the side that doesn't steal. Dad cleared his throat, rough and low. Enough, both of you. I'll take responsibility. I signed what Ryan gave me. I was a fool. Mom turned to him. You don't need to. Yes, I do, he said louder now. I thought keeping quiet meant keeping peace. But it only kept us broken. He looked at me then, eyes glassy. You were right to call it what it is, fraud. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rain started tapping at the windows, a soft percussion to our reckoning. Lily's voice broke the silence. You forged her name. Mom's hand shook. It was just a formality. Stop, I said. Stop calling your choices formality. You took my name, my credit, my trust. You used me to build your illusion of family. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I said. You were the pawn, same as always. She looked down, shame washing over her. Aunt Ruth reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I spoke with someone at First American Title, she said. There's a way to fix part of this. The side lot next to the Savannah house, it's still in Edward's name. If we sell it, the proceeds can repay what was taken. Mom frowned. You can't just sell. Dad stopped her. Yes, we can. It's the least we can do. Mom's face hardened, but she said nothing. You think money fixes this? I asked quietly. No, Dad said. But it's a start. I studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. Sign the papers. Transfer the deed. I'll handle the rest. Mom whispered. You'd sell the land our parents left us. I'd rather lose property than integrity, I said. Her tears came then, not loud, not performative, just a slow unraveling of pride. I just wanted to keep us together, she murmured. You kept us chained, not together, I replied. Aunt Ruth slid the papers across the table. Dad took the pen and signed without hesitation. Mom stared at the line before her name for a long time before finally scrawling her signature. When it was done, the air in the room shifted. Something heavy released like an old house exhaling after years of being closed up. Lily wiped her eyes. I'll pay you back someday, Maddie. Take care of your kids, I said. That's enough. She nodded, silent tears streaking her face. Dad stood and placed the pen down carefully. I'm sorry, he said simply, for everything. I wanted to say I forgave him, but the words wouldn't come. So I just nodded. It was enough for now. Mom didn't look up. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, fingers white at the knuckles. For once, she had nothing left to say. When they left, the house went quiet again. Aunt Ruth stayed behind, stacking the papers, cleaning up the cold coffee cups. You did the right thing, she said. It doesn't feel like it. It will, she said softly. Truth always feels heavy before it feels light. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke open just enough to let a strip of sunlight fall across the table, illuminating the signatures. I watched the light crawl across the wood and thought about how long I'd waited for this moment. Not revenge, not victory, just clarity. Ruth touched my shoulder. You've done your part. Now rest. I nodded, unable to answer. When the door finally closed behind her, I stood alone in the middle of the room. The smell of rain lingered sharp and clean. The papers lay neatly stacked, their edges straight, their purpose served. I picked up the pen and traced the inked names: Edward Cooper, Patricia Cooper, Madeline Cooper. Then I whispered to the empty room, truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The pen scratched across the final page, leaving a thin black line of my signature. That's it, the lawyer said, sliding the papers into a neat stack. Once your parents sign their portion, the sale of the side lot is finalized. The proceeds will go directly to you. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming through water. I nodded, pretending to understand every legal term, every number, though what I really felt was nothing at all. Just relief, mixed with exhaustion. He offered a polite smile. Congratulations, Miss Cooper. You've reclaimed what was yours. Reclaimed. I wasn't sure that word fit. I hadn't taken anything back, I'd simply stopped losing. Outside the office, the Charleston air felt clean and sharp. I walked slowly toward my car, the envelope of documents tucked beneath my arm. Each step on the cobblestones echoed like punctuation at the end of a long, ugly chapter. By the time I got home, the sunlight had shifted warm and low through my living room windows. I placed the papers on the counter beside a half-finished mug of tea and stared at them. The deed transfer, the lawyer's receipt, the cashier's check, $82,000. The number meant less than I thought it would. When my parents arrived that afternoon, the silence between us was almost polite. Dad looked older but lighter somehow, as if setting the record straight had peeled away years of guilt. Mom carried her shame like fine jewelry, polished and visible. Everything's ready, I said, motioning to the papers. Dad nodded, picking up the pen. Let's finish this. He signed without hesitation, his handwriting steady. Mom lingered. The pen hovered just above the line. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red. Do you hate me, Maddie? I met her gaze. No, Mom. Hating you would mean I still want something from you. Her lip trembled and she pressed the pen to the paper. Her signature came out shaky but legible. She slid the folder toward me and looked away. "Thank you," I said. It was the only thing I could manage that didn't taste like bitterness. Dad cleared his throat. "We'll make it right, Maddie. Maybe not today, but we will." I know I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. When they left, the house felt quiet again. Peaceful, even. I poured myself a glass of water and stared out the window. The garden outside glowed under the afternoon sundew, still clinging to the leaves. For once, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. A knock sounded an hour later. I opened the door to find Lily standing there, hair tied back, face bare of makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired but softer somehow. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Of course." She stepped inside, holding a manila envelope of her own. "I just got the annulment papers. It's official." I nodded. "Good. You deserve better." She gave a short, nervous laugh. "I don't even know what better looks like yet." "Maybe that's the point," I said. She set the envelope down on the table and hesitated. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not walking away forever." "I almost did." "But you didn't," she said, eyes glistening. "That means something." I studied her. The naive, dependent little sister I'd always known was gone. What stood before me was a woman learning to stand without a hand to hold. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded photograph. "Do you remember this?" It was a picture of us as kids, me in overalls, her in a crooked tiara, both laughing so hard our eyes were closed. On the back, in our mother's handwriting, were the words "Times, my girls, my future, asterisk." I traced the faded ink with my thumb. "Feels like another lifetime." "Maybe it was," Lily said quietly. "I'm trying to start over. I thought maybe you could teach me how." I smiled faintly. "There's no manual for it. You just start even when you're scared." Her eyes softened. "I'm scared every day." "Good," I said. "That means you're changing." She laughed through tears, then hugged me. It was awkward at first, years of distance condensed into one fragile moment, but I didn't pull away. When she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt aired out, lighter somehow. That evening, I met with the lawyer again to collect the certified check. The sun was setting, throwing orange light across the polished desk as he handed it to me. "Here you go," he said. "Full amount cleared and ready." I looked at the number again, $82,000, a perfect circle closing itself. As I walked out, I thought of all the things that money represented: betrayal, restitution, a strange kind of justice. But none of it felt like victory. At home, I placed the check in my wallet and sat at the kitchen island, the room quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I thought about everything this family had cost me, the years spent being the dependable one, the fixer, the silent backbone. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who thought love was duty. That girl was gone. The phone buzzed beside me. A text from Dad. "Times, your mother and I signed everything. Thank you for giving us the chance to make amends. Asterisk." I typed back, "Times, make them count. Asterisk." Then I turned the phone over face down. The quiet in the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. Later, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea. The night air smelled of jasmine and salt. Crickets sang somewhere in the distance. I took a long breath, letting the peace sink into me. The stars above Charleston were faint, drowned by city light, but one shone clear. I stared at it for a long time. Inside, the clock ticked softly, steady, unhurried. I looked at the check again, then folded it neatly and placed it in a small box beside the old photograph of Lily and me. The money might close one chapter, but the picture reminded me why it all mattered. Before bed, I opened my laptop and typed an email to my accountant, "Times deposit into savings. Mark the account closed. Asterisk." Then, as I hit send, I whispered to the quiet house, "That chapter's done." The words echoed softly through the stillness, settling somewhere deep inside me. Freedom didn't arrive with fireworks or fanfare. It came in quiet signatures, slow breaths, and a house finally at rest. The air smelled of sawdust and salt. Sunlight poured through the cracked windows of the old house I'd bought on East Bay, cutting across the dust like gold ribbons. The place had been abandoned for over 20 years, its walls sagging, its floors warped by humidity. But when I first saw it, I didn't see rot, I saw bones worth saving. I set my tool bag down and ran a hand along the splintered banister. The wood was scarred but strong. "You've been broken long enough," I murmured. "Let's make you whole again." Every morning started the same coffee gloves work. I stripped old wallpaper, patched plaster, replaced floorboards. The rhythm was grounding, hammer, sand, breathe. My hands ached, but the ache was honest. Sometimes when the light hit just right, I'd catch my reflection in the dusty window and barely recognize the woman staring back. Her face was calmer, her eyes softer. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. Claire stopped by one afternoon carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and a bag of pastries. "So this is the famous ruin," she said, stepping inside. "I can practically hear the ghosts applauding you." I laughed. "They're just happy someone's finally paying attention." She looked around at the stripped walls and the paint samples taped near the window. "You're really doing this alone?" "I think that's the point," I said. "It's quiet work." "Quiet suits you," she said, then hesitated. "Have you heard from your family?" "Dad sent a postcard from Savannah," I said. "They sold the old house. He says he and Mom are renting a little place near the water. It's small but honest." Claire smiled softly. "Honest is good." "It's new for them," I said, and we both laughed. Before she left, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a flyer times Women Rebuilding Women, Annual Conference, *. A note scrawled across the top in her handwriting times. "You should tell your story, *. I stared at it long after she drove away. For years I'd rebuilt other people's homes. Maybe now it was time to rebuild my own voice. The next day, as I was sanding the frame of the old parlor door, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Lily standing there wearing work boots and holding a paintbrush. "You weren't kidding about fixing ruins," she said. My heart stuttered. "How did you—" "They assigned me here," she said quickly. "I'm interning with the restoration program downtown. I didn't know it was your project until this morning." For a moment neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick, fragile. Then I nodded toward the wall. "There's a crack that needs patching." She smiled nervously. "I can do that." For the next hour we worked in silence. She sanded, I painted. The sound of our tools filled the gaps words couldn't. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "I thought you'd never want to see me again." I set down the brush. I didn't want to see the old you. She met my eyes. "I'm trying to be someone new." "You're here," I said. "That's a start." Her shoulders relaxed and she exhaled. "I've been cleaning houses. Not glamorous, but it's mine. And the kids are good. Emma's walking herself to school. Lucas joined Little League. That's what better looks like," I said. She smiled faintly. "You were right about Ryan. About everything. I just wish I'd listened before it all fell apart." I shook my head. "It needed to fall apart. Otherwise, you'd still be pretending." She went quiet, focusing on the wall again. I watched her hands move steady, precise. She'd learned something from the wreckage after all. When we broke for lunch, I made sandwiches in the unfinished kitchen. The sun poured in through the open door, warm on our faces. "You know," she said between bites, "Mom talks about you. She won't admit it, but she's proud." I raised an eyebrow. "Of what, the family scandal I aired to the world?" "No," Lily said. "That you didn't give up on yourself. She says she sees parts of Grandma in you, the stubborn good parts." The words landed softly, unexpected. "That's new," I said. "She's changing too, slowly. Guilt does strange things to people." "I know," I said quietly. "I've lived with it long enough." We ate the rest of our lunch in silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was peaceful. The kind that comes when forgiveness starts to grow roots. By evening, the house was bathed in gold. Dust floated through the air like flecks of light. Lily finished the last section of wall and stepped back to admire it. "It's not perfect," she said. "Neither are we," I replied. but it's holding." She smiled, the kind of real, unguarded smile I hadn't seen in years. "Maybe you were right. Maybe rebuilding is what we're best at. Maybe it's our inheritance," I said. Before she left, she handed me a small box. "Dad found this when they were packing up. Said it belonged to you." Inside was our grandfather's pocket watch, tarnished but still ticking faintly. I ran my thumb along its edges, the cool metal warm beneath my skin. "I thought this was lost," I said. "You mentioned it once when we were teenagers," she said. I remembered. I smiled. "Thank you." When she was gone, I sat on the porch steps, the watch resting in my palm. The ticking was steady, patient, like the pulse of something that refused to quit. The house behind me stood taller now, still imperfect, still scarred, but alive again. I looked at the golden lines I'd painted over the cracks, like kintsugi, the art of mending with gold, beauty born from breakage. As the sun dipped below the trees, I whispered to the quiet house, "You and I aren't broken anymore." The next morning, a letter arrived from the conference committee. Claire had submitted my name without telling me. They wanted me to speak at the closing session times, restoration turning ruins into renewal. Asterisk. I laughed out loud. For years, I'd let my family's story define me. Maybe now it could mean something else. I set the letter on the counter and looked around the nearly finished room, the patched walls, the polished banister, the faint scent of fresh paint. Everything I'd built here was proof that healing didn't have to be loud. It just had to be consistent. Later that afternoon, as I locked up the house, I whispered a quiet thank you to the house, to the silence, to whatever force had carried me through. Then I walked down the path toward the street, the pocket watch in my hand, ticking steady as a heartbeat. Time, I realized, doesn't erase damage. It just teaches you how to hold it differently. The lights were almost too bright. From the wings of the stage, I could see rows of faces, hundreds of women waiting, murmuring softly, notebooks open on their laps. A banner stretched across the back wall, Times Women Rebuilding Women, Annual Conference. Asterisk. I smoothed the front of my navy dress, took one slow breath, and walked toward the podium. The applause was warm but not overwhelming. It felt human, welcoming. The kind that said, "Times, we've all been through something." Asterisk. I adjusted the microphone, my reflection faint in its silver head. "When you restore an old house," I began, "you don't erase its cracks. You honor them." A ripple of quiet settled over the room. Every imperfection tells the story of what that structure survived. Sometimes all we can do is fill the cracks with something strong enough to keep it standing. I paused, let the stillness breathe. That's what I learned about homes, about families, about myself. The crowd leaned in. I told them about the house I bought on East Bay, how it was falling apart, how everyone told me it wasn't worth saving. But when I looked past the broken plaster and peeling paint, I said I saw what could be rebuilt. A woman in the front row nodded, tears shining on her cheeks. I smiled at her because I understood. I grew up believing love meant fixing. I continued. That if I held everyone together, no one would fall apart. But the truth is, when you spend your life patching up other people's mistakes, you end up losing the shape of your own. Soft laughter rolled through the room, the kind that comes from recognition, not amusement. "I used to think peace meant silence," I said. "It doesn't. Peace is when you can tell the truth and still sleep at night." I told them about my sister, how I'd lost her for years, to denial and resentment, how she'd found her way back through honesty and hard work. "She's rebuilding too," I said, one room at a time. Then I talked about my parents. "Some walls can't be fully restored," I admitted. "But even a partial repair is better than collapse." The room was quiet again, heavy with empathy. A voice from the back called, "So what happened to you?" I smiled. I learned that the softest revenge is peace and quiet. Laughter and clapping broke out at once. I waited for it to fade before continuing. Because peace isn't weakness. It's the luxury of no longer needing anyone's apology to breathe freely. I stepped back from the podium and looked out over the audience, women of every age, some smiling, some crying, all listening with their whole selves. You can't fix everyone, I said softly, but you can rebuild yourself. That's the foundation worth keeping. When I finished, the applause rose again, slow, deliberate, full of weight. I didn't bow, I just nodded grateful and walked off stage. Backstage smelled faintly of flowers and coffee. Claire was waiting near the curtain, arms folded, eyes glistening. You killed it, she said. I didn't kill anything, I said. I just told the truth. Same thing, she said, smiling. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're impossible. Someone had to push you to do this, she said. You would have hidden behind that house forever. Maybe, I said. But I think the house was part of the healing. Claire squeezed my hand. So what now? Now I exhaled. Now I go home. Later that evening, the conference hall emptied. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when I drove back to East Bay. The house stood quiet against the violet sky, its windows glowing with soft amber light. I left the porch light on when I'd gone that morning, like a promise to return. Inside, everything smelled faintly of fresh paint and lemon oil. The pocket watch rested on the mantel, ticking steadily next to the framed photograph of Lily and me as children. I lit a single candle and sat by the window. Outside, the harbor shimmered in the moonlight. A gentle knock came at the door. I opened it to find Dad standing there, holding a bouquet of daisies. His eyes looked tired, but peaceful. Your mother wanted to come, he said quietly. But she's still finding her footing. That's okay, I said. Come in. He stepped inside, looking around the finished space. You did it, he murmured. I did, I said. Finally finished something without breaking myself in the process. He chuckled softly. I saw your talk online. Your sister sent me the link. I froze. She did. He nodded. She said you spoke for both of you. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. She's been working at the restoration program. She's good at it. I know, he said. She told me she wants to start a scholarship fund in your grandmother's name. The news hit me like sunlight. That sounds like her. He set the flowers on the counter and turned to me. I'm proud of you, Maddie. Not just for the house, but for everything. I didn't do it alone, I said. He looked at me a long time, then nodded. Maybe not, but you led the way. When he left, I stood in the doorway until his car disappeared down the street. The air was cool and smelled of rain coming again. I sat back at the window, opened my journal, and wrote times. The softest revenge is peace and quiet. Asterisk. No bitterness stirred in my chest. No anger, no ache, just calm. Outside, thunder rolled far off over the harbor, low and soft. I closed my eyes and listened to it, the sound of a world that kept turning. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. The house creaked gently as the wind shifted, a familiar, comforting sound. I looked around at the golden light on the walls, the faint shimmer of the mended cracks, and smiled. If someone walked by and looked in from the street, they might have seen a woman alone. But I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. I lifted the candle, watching its flame dance against the glass, and whispered, "Here's to the quiet kind of victory." Then I blew it out, leaving the house in peaceful, perfect stillness. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness, it was freedom.